You know, if you look at the history of photography, of course the idea of what a photograph is has changed. In the beginning, it was a technique only employed by very few people, and it needed solid training, and you needed to know quite a bit about craft, technology. And in the process of history, all that knowledge was built into the machine itself. So the camera became the intelligent thing, and an idiot was able to take a photograph. We are now in the situation where you don't need to know anything about photography at all, but you are able to make a pretty good photograph, at least in technical terms. Today, in one day, mankind produces more photographs than mankind produced throughout the entire 19th century. And the numbers are still increasing and increasing. It's exponentially growing. I think we as a collective, as mankind, we are no longer able to really to perceive these images and to digest these images. And I think the artists do that as a kind of well, as a service to mankind. They look at the stuff and they make proposals what to do with it and how to work with it, because it's probably more interesting to do that nowadays than to make another image yourself. Traditionally, artists were the ones in charge of making new images, but now everybody makes that. Everybody makes that, and these images have become a part of reality, and they are as real as the rest of the reality, and so they become a subject of art. People start working with these images and look at them just as they look at the rest of the world. Of course, it is obvious that the focus of photographic activity has shifted. It's no longer making pictures, but it's also about sharing. Like if you look at photography, let's say in social networks, in Facebook, Facebook is the biggest picture archive in the world, and one of the major features of present time is that for the first time in history, a substantial part of the image production has become accessible. Photography has been a mass phenomenon for a long time. Even at the turn from the 19th to the 20th century, it was a mass production. But most of the pictures produced were never accessible for most people. They were either in private archives, they were in shoe boxes, in people's families' houses, or they were in corporate archives, they were in governmental archives. But now, in the age of online photo hosting, for the first time, a substantial part of the photographic production is accessible to virtually everybody, if we ignore that large parts of mankind do not have internet access. I mean, we always have to keep in mind it's a phenomenon we talk about that is limited to the small percentage of mankind that has internet access. We started from the point that we think that something fundamental is happening, a fundamental change is happening nowadays with availability of a new technology, with an incredible proliferation of image production, and we wanted to find out how artists react to the new situation, what kind of challenges they see there, and we selected a number of artists who, in our understanding, make work that explores the new possibilities. And of course this is done not in a museum style exhibition, so because we're not making a final conclusion, because nobody knows how the situation will be in 5 or 10 years from now on, but we know that the situation will trigger new production that is completely different from what we had before. We look around, we found maybe 50 artists who work in the field, and then the rest is balancing. It's not that you have a clear catalog of criteria, but it's just like okay, we address an interesting question here, we address another interesting question here. We don't want to replicate the same. And if two people work in a similar field or in overlapping fields, we select the one that we think is the strongest. It does not necessarily mean that the other one is bad. It's just like they complement each other in the exhibition and start a dialogue between the artworks. So there's no clear set of criteria, A, B, C. I am not interested in making a manifesto for a new movement. And I doubt that there is something like a movement in the understanding that people want to walk jointly towards a certain direction. It's more like a network, and a couple of paths coming from different directions cross, and we made with that exhibition a snapshot of the situation as it was last year or 2 years before. And with a bit of good luck, we'll have the opportunity to make another snapshot in 5 or 10 years, and I'm sure it will look quite differently. Some ideas that people are working on will probably still exist, and others will be lost. Or they will be that, well, we tried something, it was interesting at that time, but actually we didn't get very far, so then we focus on something different. What that will be, I have no idea. If you look at the history of 20th century, photography turned into the foremost aspect of visual culture. In the beginning, it was only present somewhere among others. But let's say if you look at newspapers, it was technically not possible to print photographs in newspapers, so there were drawn illustrations based on photographs. But the role of photography has been widened and grew, the importance. And it created a situation where visual information was paramount. And I think it's clear that we cannot go on looking at photography as a separate phenomenon. It is part of our visual, of our cultural production, and I don't see any reason why we should separate. Okay, let's have a look at photography. No, let's have a look at visual culture. It's like, let's say, if you look at space travel, there is the main activity is going to the moon, and there's side products. Let's say all kinds of research, of technological research, was done to facilitate that one thing, sending a rocket to the moon. These side products, they are as interesting and as important for mankind as the rocket itself. None of us will ever touch a rocket or have the privilege of being traveled to the moon with one of those things. But we all participate from the side effects of the endeavor. And this is, I think, a way how we should look at our culture in general. It's not about the good photograph you find in the museum. It's about what mankind in general does with that.